Hello and welcome back. In the last video, we saw how to add CSS styles to our sign up page that we created. Now, in this video, we'll be adding some client-side validation using JQuery. So what it's going to do is it's going to validate the data before they are sent to the database. And also note in subsequent videos, we're going to be adding also client-side validation. In case when the user visits this page and there's no JavaScript turned on the browser, the client server-side validation can work as well. To get started, let's go into our text editor. Now, the first thing that we need to do is we need to create a JavaScript file inside the JS folder. So we right click on the folder, then create new file. We can call it reg.js just to give it a simple name. Remember, it must have the .js extension. Now, what we're going to be using for this validation or client-side validation, we're going to be using JQuery. JQuery is a lightweight JavaScript library. It allows us to write less and do more. Instead of just using pure JavaScript, we're going to be writing a lot of codes. But with JQuery, it's places all those codes in functions that we can use. So we're going to be using jQuery for the validation. Now, to start with that, first let's go to our signup.php to make sure that we have IDs attached to all the input fields. Now, if we check here for the email, we have ID email, ID first name, ID last name, ID password. Then for the submit button, we have ID submit. Now, what we want to do is we want a situation whereby when this submit button is clicked, then there should be a validation carried out on this input field. If there are errors, then the errors should be displayed and the data will not be sent to the server. So we are going to start with that. Back to the registration.js file. Now, the first thing that we need to do to get this started is we need to get the document ready. Now, to do that, we just type documents, then .ready, then with function. This function is not going to take any arguments. So we just type function, put the ending semicolon. So what we are going to do is put the curly braces. Now, as I said earlier, I said we want the validation to be performed once the submit button is clicked. Now with jQuery, there's an event called the click event that we can add to the submit button. To add the click event to the submit button, we get the ID of the submit button. To get the ID of the submit button, we just type this, then hash sign, then with the ID which we called submit. But if we're dealing with classes or we want to get the class, instead of using a pound sign, we're going to use a dot or a period to get the class of the input or the submit button. But in this case, we're using a pound sign because we are getting the ID. So to attach the click event, we just type dot click, then we put the function in it, we close with semicolon, then we add the curly braces. We save our file. Now with this, we've been able to add the click event to the submit button via the ID of the submit button. Now another thing we need to do, we need to get the values from the input form or from the input fields. To get it, we also make use of the IDs that we attach to the input field. So we can create variable, we can get the values, then store them inside variables. To do that in JavaScript, to declare variables, we use the var keyword. So we'll say var email, and we can say we get the ID the way we got the ID of the submit button. then hash, and we called it email dot var. Now this is how we get the value from the input field. For pure JavaScript, we just use document.getElement by id.value. Then we use that to get the value from the input field. But in this case, in jQuery, we are just getting the ID of the element, then use the .val method or function to get the value. Then for the first name and last name, var first name, which is equal to first name as the ID dot val as well. Then for the last name, we type with same process dot val. Then for the password, we get it, and the ID of the password that we gave is password as well dot val. Now also there's another thing we need to do. We need to add a boolean value, and we're going to set it to true. Var, then we call it valid, and we set it to true. So we're going to use this value. Whenever there's an error, we set the the boolean to false, but whenever there are no errors, the value will take the initial value, which is true. And we know boolean values only have two values, or can take only two values, which are true and or false. So with this, we've been able to get the values from the input field. Now in the next video, I'll show you how we can start with the validations.